Hi, I am ready. Welcome to my kitchen. I have soup makings all over the place because today, in our continuing saga of The Entertainer, we're going to serve soups for a whole meal. I want you to set up a buffet of maybe 3 or 4 soups and have a grand time. Then you won't need much else to eat and you'll have a good time, particularly for the winter time. Do you know about the history of the restaurant? You know where we got the name? It comes from the name soup in French. In 1765, a fellow by the name of Boulanger wanted to sell soup. And he wanted you to come in and sit down and have soup for a meal. Well, that was against the law. Because what do you call them? My French is just awful. Traiteurs, who were the fellows that sold whole cuts of cooked meat, you see, would not allow my friend, Mr. Boulanger, to sell just soup as a whole meal. But he said he could because soup was very different from the meat cuts and all. So he opened a joint called, he said, I will give you a restorative, and it will restore your soul. And that is the name restaurant, restorative, in French. So today we're going to make some restoratives in honor of Mr. Boulanger. Remember, 1765, that was a while back, and the first restaurant. Now, first thing I want to do is make a chowder, and it's a concoction of 2 different coasts. It's not Boston, it's not Manhattan, it's not Seattle. It's my style, and it's very, very rich. So we'll get started right away with, incidentally, something else you must have. If you're going to make good soups, you want to have a heat diffuser. This metal piece is a very interesting bit of construction because it will even out all of the heat in your burner. You can use them either on electricity or on gas. They'll work great, and it'll make everything even so that you won't burn thick soups. And this one is going to be thick. I will begin with, let's see, turn up the heat here. Begin with a quart of good chicken stock. And that will begin boiling right away, and so we'll add the following delicious things. I have sautéed, if I can find the right one here, pumpkin soup. Here we go. I've got all kinds of soups. I've sautéed 6 stalks of celery and a couple of yellow onions in a bit of butter. Why do you sauté if you're going to boil all of this stuff? Well, because you want to even it out and soften the flavors, and blend them first before you put it into the soup. So I'll put my 6 stalks of sautéed celery and 2 sautéed onions along in a little butter, you see. Put that into my 1 quart of chicken stock and bring that to a simmer. Now I must add, remember this is a clam chowder we're making. You're wondering what's going to go in next, but it's a delicious thing. We're going to add a little bit of salt and pepper and some thyme. Where do I have some salt today? Here we go. A little bit of salt. Be careful, not too much. Lots of pepper. There we go. And for my seasoning, my herb, I'm going to use, I think, my favorite herb of all, which is a good thyme. You just want about, half a teaspoon, not much. We don't want it to taste heavy of thyme, but very light. Now, to the pot, we will add some carrots, potatoes. I don't want carrots. Carrots are in another soup. All right, we're going to add some potatoes. I have about 1.5 pounds here. And you notice that I have not taken the peel off. I've simply cubed them. And I've stored these in salted water so that, let's see, that should be about 1.5 pounds, isn't it? No, you're right. I don't really measure very well, but that's my problem, not yours. Okay. Now then, while those simmer, and that's going to take some time, you're going to simmer the potatoes along with the sautéed celery and onions in the soup stock, along with a little bit of thyme, salt, and pepper. Cook that for a time until they're very tender. Not mushy, but just barely tender. All right? In the meantime, let's prepare a soup filler. We're going to make a broth of milk and butter, a bechamel sauce, literally. First of all, we have to make a roux, and we have in our pan 1 cube of butter, and I'm going to add to that, or a stick. Is that all right? 1/4 pound. I'm going to add to that about a 1/2 cup of flour, and we'll stir that in so that it cooks just a minute. We'll make a basic roux. It's spelled R-O-U-X. In Dallas, they call it a rux, I'm afraid. I found some fellows in New Orleans that cook, and they call it a rux, too, which really I think is very funny, but that's not quite enough flour. I'll put in a bit more. Make sure I have about half and half. Usually about 1/2 cup of flour and 1/2 cup of butter. You want to cook that a bit. I'm doing this in a hurry, so I want you to cook yours a little bit longer. Don't do it too quickly because you want to get rid of that pasty flavor. You know what I mean? All right, now stir the roux into hot milk, and you notice that I've moved the milk off the burner. I don't want the milk boiling when I pour in the roux, because otherwise you're going to get lumps. And if you're tired of lumpy gravies and all, then make a roux. Don't mix flour and water together. You'll get globs. You're making a paste, you see? And the little globs of flour stick to one another if you mix them in water. But if you mix them in butter first, then they fall apart. Now, I'll put that back in the burner, and we can let that simmer for just a few minutes. All right. Now, we're going to pretend now that the potatoes are cooking nicely. And of course, they're not even bubbling yet. I need to put in 3 cans of clams. Now, because I'm from Seattle, Tacoma, I want you to know that what I'm doing now is sin. In the West Coast, we would never use a canned clam. And I'm never to be doing this, but I'm going to do it in front of you anyhow. I'm putting in just the juice from 3 6.5-ounce cans of chopped clam. Just the juice goes into the pot, because you want to cook the vegetables and the stock without overcooking the clams, you see? So we'll put the clams in at the last minute. They've already been cooked if they come in a can. You don't want to overdo them. There we go. All right. Now, back to our sauce. You see the soup is ready? The milk. See how thick that is? And we're going to thin that down, of course. It's not going to be that thick when we put it in the soup. So I'm going to get you a kettle out here, and let's change places. That's not too hot to handle. Good. All right. So we will then stir in after our potatoes are tender. Then we're going to stir in the broth of milk, flour, and butter. And this will cook up. Oh, it's so rich. Are you still with me? Don't leave now. This is where we get going. Now we need 4 ripe tomatoes. The potatoes are done. You say you're convinced you have a nice potato soup at this point, right? So then we're going to add 4 chopped tomatoes, nice ripe ones. Don't use those green things you get at the supermarket. If you have to, buy your tomatoes ahead of time and let them ripen on the windowsill. There, that's plenty. All right. And we'll simmer that now a few more minutes along with the clams. Then we'll test it for seasoning, and we have it. Where are the clams? They're right in front of me, no wonder. I have so many things going on today that I have things labeled. I've never done that for you. I have little notes all over the counter. And I think that's one of the ways that you should probably run your kitchen when you're trying to entertain, because you don't want to be exhausted when you're finally entertaining. You want to enjoy yourself. That's a basic rule for entertaining. Have things so organized that you can have fun instead of running around like a clam with your neck chopped off. Okay, we would let that simmer then for another 10 minutes or so. After I put the clams in, you see. Cook the potatoes in the stock first, along with the vegetables. Then add the tomatoes and the clams, and cook that for about 10 minutes so that the tomatoes are still, they're still in form. You know what I mean? But very tender and nice. And you have a clam chowder. Well, let me show you one. I have one in the oven. See if I have everything in there for you. Yes. Then I have one in the oven just to keep it warm. And I think you'll like it very much. Find a spot to put this out. Clam chowder is, for me, a marvelous meal. You don't need anything else. All right. Oh, boy, that's hot. Isn't this a beautiful pot? This is called a Pélion from France. Ah, there. And it weighs a ton. It's just as heavy as you thought it was. There you are. That's the finished product. Isn't that too rich for words? Now, it needs one more thing. It needs some parsley garnish. There we are. And I'm going to dish up a bit of that. And I may, if it doesn't have enough flavor in it, I put in salt and pepper too, of course. But if it doesn't have enough flavor for me, or if I want a little bit of added hotness, do you know what I'm going to put in that? I prepared some sherry put it in a little shaker. You see? Can you see the peppers floating around in there? Can you see the peppers in there? I don't think you can at all. Well, I'll try this then. Let me show you what the peppers look like. They're called hatakas. And you buy these long dried peppers and just put 4 or 5 in about a cup of sherry and let it sit for, a week. And then you have hot peppered sherry. And it's wonderful stuff. So just sloosh by the drippy, you see? Not too much. That's plenty. I can just hear Channing yelling now because that's enough hot stuff for him. He would holler, "That's it! Quit, quit, quit!" All right, enough of the chowder here. Let me begin with another one, or go on with another one. The next one. Oh, you know what I just realized? I forgot to tell you about the bacon. Let me back up and add a little bit more flavor to that pot. When you're first making your stock, blanch about a quarter pound of bacon in water. You see, I've just blanched this in a pan of hot water, and put that in the soup too. Anytime you'd like, because the bacon's cooked. You don't want to use bacon that hasn't been blanched because it has too much of a smoky flavor, and you don't want to cover the clam flavor. Not at all. Okay, are we ready? Let's go on. Am I ready? It's not you, is it? The next one that we're going to prepare is a beauty because it's made from pumpkin, so your kids are going to think it's just a riot. Have you ever made pumpkin soup? I need a big kettle here, and we'll get our stock going. I already have my stock in the pot. There we go. And we will put into the pot about 8 cups of stock, and then I'm going to use canned pumpkin because I'm cheating today. I just don't have time to find a fresh pumpkin. But if you want to use fresh pumpkin, steam about 2.5 pounds of pumpkin and until it's you can mush it, you see, and then just mush it up with a potato masher. Peel it first. But I'm using a 29-ounce can. This is 8 cups of stock. I'm using a chicken stock that you've made yourself, for heaven's sakes. I'm using 8 cups, 1 large can, or 29-ounce can, and 1 small can, or a 16-ounce can. Lord, I think it says 16, doesn't it? Yes, it does. Okay. That will make our pumpkin soup. And our seasonings are very, very simple. Show you what I mean. We're going to put into that some interesting seasonings now and a thickener. And for a thickener, we want to use a tapioca and, here it is, tapioca and chicken broth. Another 2 cups of broth. And into our 2 cups of broth, we simply stir 3 tablespoons of quick cooking, 1, 2, 3, quick cooking tapioca. And cook that until you get a thickened tapioca, or the tapioca, well, I'll show you. This other pan is all ready, you see? We're going to thicken this up. You see what I've done? See how it sets? The tapioca is all cooked. And that goes into our kettle as well, into our pumpkin. So we'll stir that in, get our pumpkin hot and steaming. And now we need to add some vegetables. And I have sauteed the vegetables already. Remember now, basic soup rule, saute your vegetables and you have a much nicer time with them. And let's see, here they are. I've sauteed a couple of onions and a little bit of celery. And I'm going to grind it up now, or puree it, so that we have a very smooth soup. I'm going to grind it up in a food blender. You can do this in a food processor too, of course. Doesn't make much difference. Alrighty. Now, I've held out from my first pot of soup a little bit of the broth so that I can add it now. That is to say, of the 8 cups of chicken broth that you are using for the pumpkin soup, hold out a cup or so you can put it in the food blender and grind up your vegetables.